Crikey, Vadanya, thank you. That's very, very generous of you to introduce me in that way. So yeah, we're in a series of Sanganite talks. We've been looking at the issue of dukkha, unsatisfactoriness or suffering, and we've been looking at the tools that Buddhism gives us to deal with it, but not just to cope with it, to turn it into something positive, to use it as an opportunity, turn it into something positive. So way back at the start of the year, I kicked off this series with a talk called Who Said Samsara Should Be Fun? Which is a phrase I heard from somebody who was involved with a Tibetan group ages ago. Somebody was complaining about Barcelona being really raucous and etc. And the Lama in their group said, well, who said Samsara should be fun? Which I rather liked as a sort of title. So who said Samsara should be fun? And in this talk, I've talked a lot, mainly about the First Noble Truth. The very first part of the very first teaching that the Buddha gave after his enlightenment. And this very, very first teaching was that dukkha, meaning unsatisfactoriness, suffering, even pain, is an inescapable part of life. So sometimes it's sort of, especially non-Buddhists will say, Buddhists think life is suffering. Well, that's not quite right. I mean, Buddhism says that dukkha is inescapable. It's an inescapable part of life. So dukkha runs all the way from dissatisfaction to unsatisfactoriness to suffering, even pain. And what the Dharma tells us is that we are bound to experience it because the world doesn't take any notice of our desires, our fears, or our likes or our dislikes. We cannot always get what we want, and often we get exactly what we don't want. And even if we do manage to arrange things so that we do get what we want for a while, so that things are as we like them, it won't last. Because everything is impermanent. And then when it doesn't last, we'll get something we didn't want. And the pleasures we spend so much time and effort trying to experience are often over in a flash. They're just over in a flash. And very often they're actually addictive and cause us even more suffering in the long run. Leaving us always wanting more. And then even if we get some really healthy, non-addictive enjoyment, which lasts for a little while, even that has to end. And what's more, we know it has to end. We know it has to end, and this colors our enjoyment with an undertone of dukkha even then. We probably all know that experience towards the end of a holiday. How many of us actually really enjoy that last day of the holiday because we know it's work again tomorrow? And then, of course, we all experience sickness. And ultimately, we all experience old age with all the discomfort that brings, and then death. And on top of that, if we're expecting out of things and events to give us lasting happiness, not only are we bound to be disappointed, but we also experience a subtle sense of unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, underlying all our experience, if we are sensitive enough, aware enough to make it conscious. And this is often called existential dukkha. This subtle existential dukkha arises as long as we're not moving in the direction of becoming a bigger person, becoming the person we could be, fulfilling our spiritual potential. And we experience it because we're spiritual beings. We're spiritual beings. And we will only feel satisfied with ourselves if we're expressing that, by moving in the direction of our spiritual potential. So that's quite a mass of dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, even suffering. I hope I'm not depressing you. But it's just one side. It's just one side of the Buddhist vision. It's just the first of the Noble Truths, because the second, third, and fourth truth show us the way out of that mass of dukkha, towards a state of well-being and fulfillment and true, deep satisfaction that we can find if we look in the right place. And you'll notice that I said here, well-being and fulfillment. I deliberately avoided using the word happiness. And I'll come back to that. I'll say more about that, why I put it that way later. But connected with that, connected with not using the word happiness, I'll give you something to think about as I talk, in case you get bored, in case you've heard all about the reflections, etc. before. I can't see all of you in the hall very well, but I wonder if you'd put your hands up if you've read Philip Pullman's book, The Northern Lights, from the Dark Materials trilogy. Yes, hooray. Okay, so I could see at least one hand up there. I'm sure there's more. I'll assume a lot of you have got your hand up. Well, if you have read the book, you'll be familiar with the idea of people having a demon, or daemon, spelled D-A-E-M-O-N. So in Philip Pullman's book, in adults, these take the form of animals of one sort or another, which express, and these animals express something about their personality. So the scary, ruthless, but brave and rather noble Lord Azrael has a beautiful, fierce leopard for a demon. And the devious, malicious Mrs. Coulter has a cruel monkey for a demon, and so on. People whose fate is to be obedient servants have dogs as demons. Others have wolves, mice, or snakes, and they all say something about their personality. So if you get bored, you could think about what sort of animal would be my demon. And more than that, how happy is it with the way I'm living? Could I live in a way that is more suited to my demon? If my demon's a leopard, am I living as a leopard? I take it your demon is probably not a cruel monkey or a mouse. Anyway, that's for later. So as I've said, in our first talk back at the very beginning of the year, that was called Who Said Samsara Should Be Fun? And tonight's talk, I originally entitled it, Who Said Samsara Should Be Fun? Revisited. The revisited got lost somewhere in the program. So what I'd like to do tonight is to take some of the themes, or one particular theme from that first talk, and take it a bit further with the help of a traditional set of 4 reflections that come to us mainly from the Tibetan tradition. And I'll introduce all of these reflections, but I want to talk mostly about one in particular, to focus mostly on one in particular. So these 4 reflections or contemplations, they're contemplations that we're meant to do while in a meditative state, while our mind is concentrated, so that they go deep, so that they sink down beyond the surface levels of our mind, into the depths of our being, the depths that determine the way we live our life, the depths that determine the goals that we pursue. And these contemplations are often called the 4 reflections that turn the mind, or the 4 mind-turning reflections. And the aim of them, well, ultimately, I mean, they can have an effect at a lower level, but ultimately the aim is to bring about a deep-seated change in the way we see the very purpose of our life. They're meant to change the whole direction of our being, the whole direction our being is tending and moving, trying to move towards, away from seeking the 4 worldly winds: pleasure, possessions, approval, status, and towards seeing the whole goal, the whole purpose of our existence as growing and making spiritual progress, which would be a complete change. It would be a complete change. If you want to know whether you've made that complete change, you might do a sort of bit of a mind experiment and ask, if they had the choice between winning the lottery and a really good meditation, which would I take? And you're not allowed to fudge it by saying, oh, I'd win the lottery and then spend it on. So would we? Do we really? Are we really that free of those worldly winds? So yeah, they're meant to change the whole direction of our being. And in the Tibetan tradition, these are seen as a preliminary practice, something you do before you get down to the serious business of imagining 9-legged whatever things with wings. But I can't help thinking that if you really made the shift that I've been talking about, that shift in the direction of our being, we'd already be a very, very long way along the path. If we really didn't care whether we experienced pleasure or pain, if we really didn't care whether people thought we were wonderful or thought we should be driven out of the community, if we really didn't care if we lost everything or whether we had possessions, if we really didn't care whether people looked down on us as low, as long as we were making spiritual progress and contributing to the Sangha, that would be, I think that would be quite major. I think that sounds to me, if you know the jargon, the Buddhist jargon, that sounds to me like what we call real going for refuge, where our life is totally directed. There's so much of our being directed in that particular direction that we are bound to get to enlightenment. We're irreversibly destined for enlightenment. But that is what the 4 mind turning reflections are meant to bring about. So, okay, what are they? Fairly briefly. So the first is often called this precious opportunity or this precious human life. And in this reflection, we reflect that we have a precious one-off, possibly, opportunity to do the only thing that makes life really worthwhile, which is to make spiritual progress, to grow as a spiritual being. So there's loads and loads of conditions that have come about, that have had to come about to create this one-off precious opportunity. For a start, we've been born as a human being, which is very unlikely in itself. We've also been born at a time when there has been a Buddha and their effects are still being felt, where the Dharma and Sangha exist, and we've come across them. And we've been born into a civilized society. It's possible to be born into societies where it's impossible to practice. We've come into contact, we've been lucky enough to come in contact with the Sangha, and we've had good enough karma to respond positively when we hear the Dharma. Lots of people don't. Lots of people don't respond positively. That's said to be due to good karma. We've got the leisure to practice. We're not just constantly struggling to make ends meet, to feed ourselves and our family, ward off the dangers. We've got the resources, the physical resources and the mental faculties and enough health to practice. All of these conditions come together to create this precious opportunity. And all of these conditions coming together is traditionally said to be as unlikely as a turtle in the ocean coming up by chance, and by chance putting its head through a single yoke, the thing that you put around an ox or a horse's neck. There's a single yoke floating in this massive ocean. There's a turtle in this massive ocean. The turtle puts its head through the yoke. That's how unlikely it would be. We could perhaps think of a turtle putting its head through a rubber ring that just happens to be floating there. So that's the first reflection. The second reflection is impermanence and death. So this precious one-off opportunity will not last. Any one of the conditions that have to come together to make it possible for us to practice the Dharma and live a significant life could change at any moment. We could get ill. We could get injured. Something could happen in our life that means we no longer have the leisure or the opportunity. Everything could fall apart. Society could fall apart. Who knows? Anything. But even if things sort of carry on as they are for the time being, we will inevitably die. And when that happens, our precious human life will be over. And if we haven't used that life well, we'll be swamped with regret. So we better get on with doing the things that make life meaningful. In the Buddha's words, we should be like someone whose turban is on fire. That's how urgent we should see our practice. And then the third reflection is about the reality of the law of karma. So the way we act, speak, and think now creates our future self. Strands in our being that we act out, the intentions that we act out, they strengthen and we create our future being. And the being we become determines whether we experience positive or negative states. And that is a reality. That's the reality of the law of karma. So if we care about our well-being and want to escape suffering, the way to do that is not to pursue the usual worldly ways that we try to be happy. It is to live skillfully. That's the third reflection. And that brings us to the last of the mind-turning reflections, the one I want to experience, the one I want to explore a bit further. So this is about the defects of samsaric existence. In the traditional Tibetan version that I came across in a book by a Tibetan Lama, the heading for this reflection is "No Happiness in Samsara." We're told to reflect that there is no happiness in samsara. Well, that sounds a bit extreme, doesn't it? I mean, is it asking us to accept there's no pleasure to be had anywhere in the world? It's clearly not true. It's clearly not true. We can accept that there's inescapable dukkha, but no happiness. That's pretty extreme. No happiness in samsara. But I think to get a bit of a better perspective on what this really means, it's helpful to look in a bit more detail at the words and what the words mean. So firstly, samsara. No happiness in samsara. Well, samsara is not the world. It's not the physical world we live in. Samsara is not a place. Samsara is a state of being. Now, of course, in Buddhism, our state of being and the environment that we experience are intimately connected. They're seen as being two sides of the same coin, one being an expression of the other. So when we finish this series, I'm pretty sure, in fact, we're going to do a series on the Wheel of Life. And in the Buddhist Wheel of Life, or on the Buddhist Wheel of Life, there are traditionally depicted 6 realms of being. 6 realms that we can be reborn into and inhabit for a while as we go round and round. So there's a realm of constant craving and addiction, the realm of the hungry ghosts. There's a realm of intensely painful mental and emotional states called a hell realm. There's a realm of big egos in competition with each other, the realm of the Titans or Asuras. There's a realm in which the beings just focus on physical needs and pleasures and comfort, the animal realm. There's a realm of more subtle pleasures, the God realm. And finally is the human realm, the realm in which there is cooperation, culture, responsibility, and all that makes possible spiritual progress. And each of those realms is depicted as a place in which we can be reborn, but each is really a state of being. You can go out any day in Sheffield and probably find people who live in all of those states. God realm might be a little bit harder to come by, but I'm sure there are. Each of us will probably have experienced, well, each of us will have experienced some of these states. Probably a lot of us will experience all of these states at one time or another. So these realms are shown in the wheel of life, and they're states of being of samsara. And around these realms on the wheel of life, around the outside of the wheel, there's a depiction in symbols of the mechanism that moves the wheel round and round and keeps us going round and round in circles. And then at the center of the wheel, there are the forces that drive this mechanism. And these are depicted as a cock, a pig, and a snake. And these forces are grasping, us trying to grab those experiences that give us pleasure, that we like. Aversion, pushing away, us pushing away, getting angry at, blaming other people for, fearing those experiences that we don't want, that give us negative, that give us unpleasant sensations. And then finally, the delusion that underlies all of this, our underlying delusion about the way to happiness. And those drive this wheel. This pig, this snake, and this cock drive the wheel, and the wheel is samsara. To be in samsara means to be going around and round on the wheel, driven by those forces, driven by greed, hatred, and delusion, as it's sometimes put, aversion, attraction, and delusion. It doesn't mean to be in the physical world we live in, or any other world for that matter. So that's a bit about one bit of that title, No Happiness in Samsara. Samsara is a state of mind in which almost by definition, we're not happy. We might spend little times out of it. But the other important word is happiness. So I don't know what the word is in Tibetan or whatever the original language was, but I bet you that our word means something different, because words rarely map exactly from one language to another. I bet we don't mean quite the same thing. But what does the word happiness mean in the way that we use it here and now? I think that here and now, in this point of history, what we tend to mean by happiness is something like a constant flow of pleasant sensations, without unpleasant sensations, without pain or dukkha. It means a life filled with as much pleasure as possible, where we get the things we like, where we don't get the things we don't like, where we are comfortable, where we are safe and secure, where we don't have experiences that make us feel uncomfortable, and where we don't experience stress or any other uncomfortable or painful mental or emotional states. I think that is more or less what most people very often mean by happiness. Well, it's not going to happen. It is absolutely not going to happen. This is not attainable for all the reasons we've already talked about in this series and tonight. And even worse than that, pursuing this version of happiness is actually harmful and leads to more suffering. If our life is about the pursuit of that sort of happiness, we will be going in the wrong direction. We will not be getting any closer to our true well-being. So we should probably scrap the word happiness, get rid of it. Happiness, as we use it, is the wrong word for what should be the goal of human life. I think we can get a better idea of what a state of human well-being really looks like from a classical Greek culture, classical Greek ideas, and particularly the classical Greek word Eudaimonia. So this has got demon in it, as in the demons in Northern Lights. Eudaimonia, state of your being, and you meaning something like happy, or, well, I can't mean happy, good, in a good state, pleased. So eudaimonia is sometimes translated as fulfillment. I quite like fulfillment. I can imagine us being fulfilled of what is good, what is light, perhaps. Sometimes translated as fulfillment, it literally means something like having a good demon, or having a demon, I think, that's pleased with us. So demon, as I said, spelled D-A-E, so maybe I should call it daemon, like the demons in Northern Lights. So to understand what eudaimonia means, having a pleased demon or a good demon, we need to look at what the ancient Greeks meant by demon. So these sorts of demons are sometimes described as tutelary deities, in the sense of a divine being that has a connection to a particular human being and takes a particular interest in that human being. So each human being was seen as having their own particular daemon, who took this particular interest in them. They're a bit like guardian angels, but with some important differences, as we'll see. So, as I've said, many of us will be familiar with the idea of demons, something like demons, from the Dark Materials trilogy, from the book Northern Lights. In that book, everybody had a sort of external demon, a demon you could see in this realm that was, as it were, was part of their being and took the form of an animal. So children's demons could shapeshift. They could be just about anything. But once one was an adult, once one's personality was sort of in existence, as it were, these demons express their personality. So as I've said, the scary but brave and perhaps really ruthless but still noble Lord Asriel had a fierce but beautiful leopard for a demon. Mrs. Coulter, the horrible Mrs. Coulter, had a cruel monkey for a demon. Others had dogs. So if your nature was to be obedient, you had a dog as a demon. Others had wolves, snakes, etc., etc., etc. Seagulls, which express something about their personality. So that the classic, it's getting there, but the classic Greek idea of a demon wasn't quite like that. For a start, the Greeks' demons existed in another realm of being. You couldn't see them. And it was the semi-divine being that took a particular interest in one particular individual. Well, what a person's demon was interested in was not that they should have an easy life. It was not that things should always go the way they wanted, which probably means not doing very much and staying safe, etc. In that way, demons were maybe different from guardian angels, and certainly not like fairy godmothers. What the demons were interested in was that their human should develop their full potential. That they should become the person they could be, the person they should be, with all their abilities and strengths developed, that they should achieve what they were in a way meant to achieve, so that they could live out their fate to the full and do, as it were, what they were meant to do. And of course, these demons knew that for human beings to become that person, they were going to have to face all sorts of challenges and all sorts of difficulties and even all sorts of unpleasant situations, which the human being almost certainly wouldn't choose for themselves. They had to face all sorts of difficulties so that they could be forced to find new resources in themselves and develop their strength of character, if you like. So if their human chose comfort and safety and inertia over challenge and difficulty and stress and risk, their demon would start to prod them in the right direction. at first it might just mean making them a bit dissatisfied with themselves, a bit uncomfortable, a bit twitchy or anxious. In that connection, there's a guy called Reginald Ray who's practiced within the Tibetan tradition, who wrote a book called, bound to sell this, Secrets of the Vajra World. Anyway, in Secrets of the Vajra World, he, which is better than it sounds, he talks about how our stress, well, not stress, our anxiety, our sense of inner discomfort, even depression, etc., actually is the work, he says, of our Buddha nature. He says our Buddha nature is not the lovely thing that people think it is. Like, I'm just a Buddha and I just hang around and I'm a Buddha. Our Buddha nature wants us to develop. And if we are not moving in that direction, it pokes us. And we feel those pokes. So demons can be a bit like that, but they can also engineer circumstances that push the human out of their rut. Sometimes this might be positive, you meet the right person, but they want to get us out of our ruts, out of the cozy cocoons that we will tend to create for ourselves. And the things that get us out might be opportunities for challenge and adventure that seem really exciting and inviting, so that we go for them if we're lucky. But they aren't always. If their human persisted in avoiding, as it were, their destiny, the demon might even cause some sort of problem or disaster or even illness that would chuck us out of our comfort zone. Demons believed in tough love. But even this tough love was better than what would happen if the human just kept on, turning away from challenges, turning away from doing anything significant. Because when that happened, it was a possibility that the demon would lose their patience. And then the demon might give up. It might give up on its human and just go away. And it would abandon the human being. And to lose your demon was the ultimate disaster. You might remember what happened to the children in the book, Northern Lights, who had their demon cut away. I found that truly chilling, that bit of the book, truly chilling. Well, that might give us a bit of an inkling of what it would be like for your demon to say, I've just had enough, I'm off. Anyway, so that's what demons were like guardian angels, but not like anything like so nice and cozy. Ruthless, in fact. And the state of eudaimonia, the state of having a pleased demon, having a demon who is pleased with their human, our demon is pleased with us if we are moving in the right direction, becoming the person we can be. In classical Greece, eudaimonia was very connected to the idea, I think you pronounce it arete, somebody can correct me on that, but it means, usually translated as virtue. But it meant virtue in a sense that's much more than we usually use it today. For the classical Greeks and for previous ages in our own, I think, Northern European culture, virtue included courage and strength and nobility of character. It includes serving something higher than the self. So a virtuous knight was in service of chivalry. They had courage and enterprise and energy. So it also included excellence. It included excellence in what we set out to do. So if we had a vocation, if we had a skill, virtue included doing that really well, developing that to the best of developing our talents and using them well. And I think eudaimonia is a better word for the sort of well-being that should be the aim of human life than happiness as we normally use it. Eudaimonia is a bit of a mouthful, so to make it easier, maybe we should just use the word fulfillment. As I said, I really like the word fulfillment. Part of my meditation practice that I was given at ordination involves seeing myself filled up with golden light. And I sort of, fulfilled with something very, very beautiful, something very positive. And what distinguishes fulfillment, or if you like, eudaimonia, from our usual idea of happiness is that fulfillment can include dukkha and it can transcend it. It is perfectly possible to be fulfilled and at the same time to be in physical pain, to be stressed, to be in all sorts of unpleasant mental or emotional states, to be overburdened and tired out. But we probably wouldn't say we were happy if we were in any of those states. But any of those states can be there in the more dignified state of eudaimonia or fulfillment. If we avoid those states, we just sort of go into our cocoon and retreat. We retreat. We do not develop. So if we make the goal of our life eudaimonia or fulfillment rather than happiness as we usually understand it, we will live a very different sort of life, which is precisely the aim that the mind-turning reflections are trying to move us towards. So we will take on projects and accept challenges, especially projects that are about something bigger than our own wants. And we'll accept the stress that that might bring and the workload that that might bring. If we have a vocation, I don't know, medicine, the arts, writing, whatever, we will strive to do it as well as we possibly can. And we won't be limited by things like fear for our financial security or fear for disapproval from others. So yeah, we won't be allowed to be ruled by fear. And this will allow us, well, if we want to, if this is our direction our demon is taking us, it'll free us up to devote ourselves to the spiritual life, for example. Or to devote ourselves to a higher cause, to follow our spiritual quest, and make us free to make changes. Now, you know, that applies particularly if we don't have dependence, that change would just give us total freedom, actually, complete freedom in a society that's as wealthy as ours. Well, of course, some of us do have dependence and we're not free in that way. But we would accept that responsibility. We would accept that responsibility happily and work with it as well as we can. Cheerfully accept it, work with it. If we make fulfillment our goal, we will make commitments. We will not try and keep our options open. We will make commitments to what we see as positive in our life, and then we will keep those commitments and suffer the stress and problems involved in keeping our commitments. And that, of course, is the way to grow. That is a way to grow in the process. So if we live that way and we do all those things, well, we're not always going to be cheerful and grinning. If we try and do meaningful things with our life, whether it be in the spiritual sphere, in the projects, whatever, it's going to involve difficulty. It's going to involve stress even. We will not always be cheerful and grinning, happy in the usual definition of the word, but we will be moving towards becoming the larger person we could become. We might not be grinning, but our demon will be smiling and pleased with us. And at some level, we will experience that. We will experience that as a deep satisfaction and rightness. I can't quite find the words for it, but there's a sort of rightness about, if you like, knowing that we're living the life we should live. There's a sort of sense of rightness about it, which even if we could have, I don't know, spend our life on ski resorts and in the Seychelles, we would not choose that over being the person we know we need to be and doing the things we know we need to do. So there's deep rightness and satisfaction. And of course, that satisfaction is the very opposite of dukkha, because dukkha is unsatisfactoriness, and satisfaction is the opposite of dukkha. So if we live that way, not only we will experience what we call dukkha, but we will also transcend it. Thank you.